Now. I'm going to first jump on the camera real fast. Hi, my name is Bradon Lewis. I'm a senior instructional consultant for the Office of Digital Education. And with me, I have several coworkers. I have Jessica and Nicole. They will be actively monitoring the chat box. So if you have any comments, questions, feel free to place them inside the chat box. This webinar will be broken into two parts. The first part will go over a deep dive of the gradebook, and the second part will go into a deep dive of the Speedgrader. At the end of each sections, I'm going to open it up to question and answers that allow you to ask all the questions that you have. So if you want to go ahead and just kind of take notes of the questions that you have, that way when it comes to the question and answering section, we can go ahead and answer those there instead of waiting to the very end to ask all the questions. And again, if you have any questions on the spur of the moment or want some clarity, feel free to use the chat box, and then we'll use that to get some more information from you. This is going to be about the gradebook. So again, it's important to point out that this session is designed for faculty. Students and staff could be in this class, but I don't really see the value you're going to have. So it's primarily designed for faculty. This webinar will be recorded, and you'll get a video recording. You'll get a link to the video recording after this webinar and a follow-up email. So again, if it's one of the things you miss it, don't worry, you can rewatch the video afterwards. All right, I'm going to go ahead and turn off my webcam just to save on bandwidth, and let's jump into Speedgrader and the gradebook. And again, as I said before, this is going to be broken into two parts. Wow, my mouse is just clicking on things. We've broken into two parts. First, we're going to go deep dive on the gradebook. We're going to look at how you input grades into the gradebook. We're going to go over some of the advanced features of the gradebook features, and I'm actually going to show you exactly what that looks like. Then we're going to have a little question and answering period, and then we're going to go into the second part, which will cover Speedgrader. So let's go ahead and just jump right into the gradebook. And one of the things that's really important for me to point off is that the gradebook is really an extension of what your syllabus is. So anything that you see here, you want to make sure that it reflects the information that you've placed in your syllabus that you've given to your students at the beginning of the semester. So the gradebook just allows you to work as a way to communicate between you and your students on your expectations and how well your students are doing with that. Don't feel like the gradebook has superpowers of communication. It only wants to do what you tell it to do. And so that's why it's very important that when you're building out your assignments that you start putting all the information into your assignments correctly the first time. That way it reflects into the gradebook. And the best way to do this is before your class starts. That way, if there's any issues, you're not confusing your students as the point value changes or as group changes, because it does send notifications to your students. One of the default features inside of the gradebook is that every time you update a grade or grades are changed or you add a comment, it will send a notification to your students saying that, hey, you have a new grade or you have comments, you have information here that you can look at that your teacher is telling you. And so it's really important to understand that whenever you input something into it, by default, it's going to want to send out a notification. One of the other things that you can do inside the gradebook is that you have the ability to change the view of what information you see right here on the screen. So now, just in case you haven't used Canvas before, to access the gradebook, you want to pull up your Canvas course like I have right here, and you'll see I have this little notification item right here. This is a notification that faculty receive telling you you have a grade that needs your needs your attention. So you have an item in here that is new that needs your attention, and so that's the notification that faculty receive as well. But if I'm wanting to simply access my whole gradebook, I want to go ahead and select on the grades item, and that'll take me into the gradebook. The view that you see here is different than the view that your students see. Students will see a personalized view that only shows their information as they are students. You have the ability to go through and see all of your students and see all of the assignments that you have inside that built inside your course. So if I look over here, I can scroll through here and I see all the different assignments I've entered. And at the very top line, it's going to give me the name of the assignment with a total point value of that actual assignment. Now, one of the tricks that I like to do is if I want to navigate to the assignment in question, I can move my mouse over here on top of this name right here, and you'll see that my cursor changes from a regular pointer to a finger, allowing me to select it. So if I wanted to jump into one of these assignments, all I have to do is move up to the title up here, select it, and that'll take me straight to that assignment. And so if you're wanting to get through all the different assignments within your gradebook, all you have to do is go to your gradebook, click on the title, and that'll take you straight to the assignment. Right here, when you see out of 20 points, this out of points, the point value for the overall assignments is not controlled inside of Gradebook. That's actually controlled at the assignment level. So if you're wanting to change this overall points for this paper, you actually want to click on the assignment, click on edit, and this will allow you to change the point value. But let's go ahead and go back into Gradebook and go over some of the extra information that you see here. If I want to go through and change the view, such as my student names right here, I can do so by moving my mouse up to the student name right here, and I'll see these three dots, the ellipses that show up right here. If I select it, I then have the ability to change the way the assignments are displayed. So for instance, on the student name right here, I can sort by name, I can sort by student ID or login ID, or I could change the order of its doing by either first to last to first. So if you want to change the way the student name is organized, you can do so by going up to student name and clicking on the dot, dot, dot. The same thing can go for the display name. If you want to change from last name to first name or first name to last name, all you need to do is navigate here and select which item that you're wanting to, and then that'll change the way it displays. This allows you to, if you have 100 students into your course, it allows you to quickly find that information. Now, you also have the ability to have secondary information. Sometimes this is your university ID or a SIS ID. A lot of times within UC Denver at Anschutz, this information really isn't relevant to students, but depending on your program or to faculty, this information isn't relevant to faculty, but depending on the way your program is set up, you might actually want to see the university name right here. Or you might actually want to see my integration ID, which I think is empty. And then I think my SIS ID should show up there for people who are active in the students. So if you're wanting to have that information, all you need to do is go over here to secondary info and select which information you're wanting displayed. By default, however, it is turned off and you're only going to show the names right there. You could also go on here. If I click on this drop down arrow over here, I can go ahead and select inactive enrollments or concluded enrollments. Inactive enrollments means that they are a student that have submitted work into your gradebook, but they are no longer inside of your course. They've been removed from the SIS. This means that they will basically be in your course, but not active into your course. If you're wanting to show them or remove them, all you have to do is hit this check mark right here. Now, one of the things I do want to point out here is that depending on how it's entered into the student information system, if that enrollment, if that drop hasn't been fully communicated to the student information system, sometimes there is a delay where they'll still show up here in the gradebook because they haven't fully been removed from the SIS. And so sometimes you might see a student over here that has been dropped, but their paperwork hasn't filed or that they're still sitting over there. And so when you see something like that, the best thing to do is contact your department and have them look into the enrollments for that student to make sure that they have fully been removed from the SIS. If you need additional information here, I would contact OIT and they'll be able to look into it and see what's happening and why your student is still showing up into your course. Because once a student is inactive, as you see over here by default, it will not show the inactive enrollments. And all you have to do is navigate in here and make sure that that is unchecked to remove any of those drop students. And so that's kind of the basics of how you can sort the names of your students and have the additional information that you're wanting to add right there. One of the other things that you can do is if I click on this little view drop down, I have the ability to range the assignments by either A through Z, by due dates, by point values, or by modules. So by default, it's going to add these items right here by the date when they were added. So if I go into view arrange by, I can change it by alphabetical order, or I could even change it by due dates. And so you can organize your gradebook to what makes sense to how you're teaching your curriculum. For me, I find the easiest way to arrange by is by due dates, having it be the oldest arrangements going all the way to the newest, or vice versa, newest to oldest, because I'm going through the semester and I kind of want to start, here's my start, here's how I move through the entire semester. And so arranging by due dates is my personal favorite on how I want to organize it. I also can go over here to filters, and I can even filter out different modules or student groups that if I only want to see a smaller detail, I can click on one of these items and show it right here. Currently, I only have 2 assignment groups. I won't show this feature right here, but if I wanted to, I could click on assignment groups and it would just show me the exact assignment groups and it would take out a lot of the details. Statuses. Automatically inside of the gradebook, you have the ability to, or it automatically, if you see on here how they're color coded, some are gray, some are red, some are blue. These automatically are statuses that show when the assignment was submitted and what current state it is in. So essentially, if it was turned in on time or if it was turned in late, if I click on statuses right here, it'll go ahead and tell me these color codes that I'm seeing right here. If I see over here that if it's blue, that means it was turned in late. If it's red, that means, hey, this assignment hasn't been turned in and it wants to jump out at you. And then you have the excuse and drops if you want to go through and hide those. We'll go ahead and color code it right here into it. So if anytime you're wondering what the statuses mean, what are all these little codes mean right here, click on view and select statuses. And then you'll be able to see that information right here. And one of the other things that's interesting here, if I click on view, I have the ability to unclick unpublish assignments and I have the ability to show notes. So I'm going to go ahead and select both of those right here. So it's going to go ahead, if I had any unpublished assignments over here, it would make them visible so I can see them. But then I have this little section here for notes. These notes are only going to be visible to you so that you can go on here and type in any extra items that you want to. So if you have a student comes to you say, unfortunately, I have something going on in my family where I'm going to be unable to submit the assignment on Friday, you can make a note right here in the gradebook saying student's going to be out on Friday. I can expect the assignment to be turned in late. Or I can go in there and say that this student has asked for accommodations. Here's what their accommodation is. I can put that notes right into the gradebook. And any information that I place right here is only visible to the faculty of this course, meaning students will not be seeing it. So I could paste it right there and have that information. And so notes is a really helpful way to get extra information. Always leave it there so it's visible when you're going through and grading the assignments. If you have any assignments, this is also a good way over here. If I unpublish the assignment, it will not be visible into the gradebook. And so one of the questions I'm seeing here, if I want to delete an assignment, but keep it in as a reference, that's where how you're gonna wanna unpublish the assignment so students don't see it. But then depending on whether or not you wanna have it in your gradebook is whether or not you're gonna have this visible or invisible. An unpublished assignment is an assignment students will not be turning in, so it's clearly used as a reference or something that you're currently working on. And so a good way to do that, if you want to leave the assignments in your course, but you don't want them showing up in the gradebook, you want to go ahead and uncheck this so that you won't see it right here. And that way you'll be able to look back on it, but your students won't see it and you won't see it into the gradebook. All right, so we've gone through and we've covered the basics right here of how you can sort by your course name, how you can add that information over there. One last thing that I want to show before I start deep going in a little bit more information on the actual grading parts is I can go ahead and if I click on this drop down arrow right here, I can see the gradebook history. And once I select this, this will show me a detailed information of when assignments are turned in, when assignments have been graded, and when even maybe a grade has changes from one faculty member to another. It'll show you a complete history of all the information on here. And as you can see with these drop downs, I can actually go through here and filter by either a student's name or a different grader. So if you have different faculty or your TA's grading, I could filter out all these informations right here and it'll go ahead and show me that right there so I can see actively what is happening. So if I go over here and hit filter, it'll filter and show here are all the items that I have graded, and it looks like it just went ahead and it looks like it doesn't like me. Oh, so I'm actually demoing this a little bit weirder, so that's why it's not filtering it correctly. But when you're going through your courses, you'll be able to type in this correctly. Here's Amy. She's the one who set up this course and is listed as a teacher. So if I select her name right here and filter it, it'll just show her results over here. And that way you can go ahead and click on that. And then you can even go over here and you can actually artifact and I can go through and say, let's see all the assignments for paper one. And I can then go for here and filter it. So I'm looking at the chat box right now. So the question I'm seeing here is for to give an accurate sense of the grade, you will need to publish all of your assignments at the beginning of your course. Sometimes that is difficult, which is very true. Um, I honestly would tell you you don't have to have all of your assignments posted at the beginning of your course. I would have all of your assignments and the points that they're worth listed inside your syllabus. It's one of those things on here as you're doing the grades. If you don't have all the assignments visible, and let's say one of the things we'll cover later is assignment grades, assignment groups. And when you have weighted assignments, sometimes those averages will be off if you don't have all the assignments turned in. And so some of the numbers might be a little bit off. I would encourage you to publish all your assignments as soon as possible, just so that they'll be able to see here's my overall grade, here's the points values. It can just be one of those things that's really weird. But if you've gone ahead and you've given all that information in your syllabus, where they'll see, okay, I have this assignment coming up. Here's kind of what's expected of me for this assignment. Here's my total points. It really makes it easier for your students to understand what's going on. Um, when you're, let me see here. Yes. So it's kind of one of those things, like, especially if you're doing a grade where you're dropping the lowest grade and your students don't know which grade is going to be dropped. Unfortunately, that's one of those things that they're not going to be able to see the drop grades until the very end of the semester. And so it's kind of one of those things you'll probably always have nervous students sending you information. But the more information that you have visible to your students, the less that they'll be hopefully asking you questions. So I'm going to go ahead and jump on to some of the next areas over here. And now I'm going to cover on all some of what each of these columns work and how you could be able to do different features within inside of them. So I'm going to go ahead and range oldest to newest. So right here, I have an example of a final exam, and I went ahead and moved that at the very beginning of the gradebook just so I can see it right here for you. And if I click on the dot, dot, dot right here, I'm going to get additional options of what I can do inside the gradebook. One of the things I first want to point off over here is this grade posting policy. By default, any grades that you put into the system will automatically notify your students, hey, a new grade has been entered. The reality is sometimes when you're grading, you're not going to be able to grade every student's paper at the exact same minute that you're for each student. It's going to take time. It's going to take hours sometimes to read through the papers, to provide the feedback, and provide grades. And there is a potential as when you go through the grades, maybe you want to balance them out a little bit, and you want to go back and regrade some of the assignments. And so it's important to point off that the grade posting policy will automatically notify students when new grades are entered. You as a faculty member have the ability to override that and says, no, I don't want them to automatically visible. I want to go ahead and manually do it, or I want to tell them what's being sent, when it's being sent. I want to have some control over it. And so that's where you want to go to the grade posting policy and go ahead and set this to manual, just so that you don't have to have your students constantly send you emails saying, why is it that so and so got a grade, but I didn't get a grade? What's going on? When am I going to get my grades? By putting it in a manual, I have the ability to go up here to the ellipses and say hide grades. And what this is doing is it's going to say, yes, I don't want to release any of my grades until I'm completely done with grading, and I want the grades to be published and seen by all my students. So I'm going to go ahead and select hide. And if you'll notice that little header once my internet loads, it's thinking. An icon will change and it'll have an eye with a cross out. So right here. When you see this icon, as I see here on the week 1 quiz, what this means is that you're able to go in, make any changes that you want to this assignment, and students will not receive a notification until at the end when I go through here and say, okay, go ahead and publish it. So I can go through on the final exam. I could either manually type in my grades right here, or what the feature will show later is we can actually use Speedgrader, and you can go ahead and assign grades using Speedgrader. But I'm going to go over here and I'm going to go ahead and assign some of the points over here like I would. And so as I finish my grading process, I'll then be able to go up here to these dot, dot, dots and select post grades. And so what I essentially did is I was able to put the grades into hiding so that it would hide the grades until I'm finished doing my grades. Once I've entered all the grades and I'm finished, I want my students to be able to see their grades. I then go over here and say post grades. When I select post grades, it's going to ask you, do you want to go ahead and post grades to everyone? Or do you want to post grades to only those that you have graded? The reason why you might want to go ahead and do everyone versus graded is if you have students who are turning in the assignment late, or if you have students that haven't turned in the assignment at all, you can actually determine whether or not I want to hold back letting them see that zero in the gradebook, or do I want them to see that zero in the gradebook? So maybe they turn that assignment in late or as soon as possible. And so that's where you can kind of choose. Yes, I want all students to be able to see the grades. I want them to see the notes I leave them. Or no, I only want to have those I've already graded. Then I can go ahead and say, yes, I'll post those grades. If you do select graded down here, it's important that you go back in later after you finish grading completely and repost the grades, and this time say everyone when you're fully done with the grades. Otherwise, those who are turning in the assignments late will not be seeing their grades, and they might be sending messages going, why did I not see that assignment? So the moment I hit post right here, all the grades that have been entered, the students will be notified that they have a new assignment that has been turned in and that their grade is visible, and now they can take a look at it. Another one of the options that you can do with inside of the gradebook is if I scroll down to each individual per student right here and I select inside the box, then I can go over here. Once I've selected the box, you see this little arrow button right here? This opens up a new tab that gives me some extra information, which allows me to change the statuses. So since this assignment was turned in, I can go ahead and say none, or I can say late. If I want to change the status over here to excused, meaning that this assignment doesn't have to be turned in, it won't be counted against the grid, I can go down here and say excused. But also I can go down here and I can leave comments for my students. So as I'm manually entering information inside the gradebook, I can choose the current status of the assignment and I can leave comments that will be visible to your students. If a student leaves a comment back for you, you'll see a notification that says, hey, a student has a comment back for you, and you'll see these comments right here. So let me go over to another assignment. I'm going to select this little tab again, and oh, nope, no feedback there. Let me see if I have one right here. Oh, unfortunately, I'm not seeing any feedback. But if you're getting feedback over here, you'll be able to see that right here off to the side. And that way you can kind of have a dialogue if your student has a question about your student or about your grading or about a document. You'll be able to see that right here when you're grading. And again, you also will see this when you're in Speedgrader. There'll be a comments listed right here off to the side. And so that's a little bit more in depth on about how statuses work and how you can leave comments back and forth with and between your students by simply going to the student and the assignment and selecting this tab out button right here and showing this extra control panel. So let's go back to the ellipses for the individual assignments and let's look at some of the other features that you have inside the Speedgrader. So if I click on here, again, I want to be able to sort either from the highest to lowest grade. So meaning it'll override the overall sorting that you have for your gradebook with your student's first name and last name. I can actually sort by the highest grade. I can sort by who's missing assignments and so on and so forth. But what I can also do over here, and one of my favorite features, is message students who. And so this is a way that if you're wanting to, from the gradebook, send messages to your students, um, for instance, okay, I want to go ahead and I want to say anyone who hasn't submitted assignment yet, I could send them a personalized message saying, hey, just a reminder, this assignment is currently late. Please log in and complete your assignment and upload it here. Let me know if you have any questions. Or I could go over here and say, let me go ahead and send a message to everyone who hasn't been graded. You can let them know, unfortunately, I'm running a little bit behind in my grading. I should have everything done by tomorrow. And then I could even go over here. It says, hey, you really kind of scored. I think you could do a little bit better job. I want to give you a chance to redo the assignment again to maybe earn some extra points within your assignments. Or if you wanted to go on here and says, hey, you all did a great job. Keep up the great work. It'll send them a personalized message, but instead of having to select each individual names, you can have the gradebook automatically filter out who those students are. So I can say, yes, score more than, let's say, a 1. It'll show me the name of the student. It'll give me the point right here. And I can say, congratulations, you scored more than this. You're doing great work. Keep it up. And so you can send positive messages, negative messages, and encouraging messages all to your students straight from the gradebook. So one of the questions I saw a little bit earlier in here was about curving the grade. Um, on each of these columns over here, if you want to curve the grade, all you need to do this is by selecting the ellipses right here and choosing curve grades. This is also the section that you're able to go through here and assign zeros for all unsubmitted assignments. So if you wanted to add a 2-point grade or a 1-point grade or whatever percentage curve that you wanted to, you can go up here and say, all right, I want to go ahead and boost the average score up to this. And then I want to go ahead and say everyone who hasn't turned in an assignment, I'm going to submit this as a 0. This is something that I would say you want to be very careful how you use it, because once you curve a grade, it can't be undone. Once you go ahead and add a little extra bonus points to level out the score if you're wanting to, that's going to cause some of those issues right here. And so you want to be very careful if you're wanting to curve grades. Know that it does adjust everyone's grade to kind of bring it up to the overall average. And that's where you do it right here. And again, if you're wanting to go ahead and make sure that people who didn't submit the assignment don't receive any of the curve, they still have the 0 points, you would select assign 0 for unsubmitted there, and I can go ahead and say curve grades. And over here, it'll say 4 scores have, or 4 students have been updated. And this is actually a really bad example because I only have 2 points possible, so you're not really seeing the full curve right here, but would adjust it right there and you'll see the points right there. So the question I'm seeing on here is, can you assign zeros but not curve? Unfortunately, right now, the only way that you can assign a 0 to an assignment that hasn't been turned in is by doing that manually. So as you'll see on here on my paper 3 example, I have a dash right here, which means that it's unsubmitted. If I wanted to change that to a 0, all I have to do is select on the individual column, type in 0, press enter. And that's how you can manually assign a 0 to that item. Unfortunately, there's not an automatic check mark that you can go back and select and give everyone a 0 for unturned assignments. You do have to go in and manually enter the 0 in for it. So one of the other things I want to go back here and add, and so that's kind of the basics of how these options work right here, how you can enter in the grades, how you can change statuses, and how you can go through there and add extra information into it. I want to go ahead and move on to the next section, which is weighted grades or doing assignment groups. And so if I scroll the very bottom or the very end of my gradebook, I see a percentage base for papers and discussions and a percentage base for quiz. Currently, these are all just doing different percentage base that don't quite add up to exactly what you're wanting to. This total right here is simply going to be filled in with all these scores right here, and it'll create the average and place it right over here. But what I'm really wanting to is I want to create assignment groups, place everything into the assignment, and have it each assignment group create a percentage of the overall final grade. And the way you do this is actually going outside of the gradebook into the assignment section of your class. So if I go over to assignments, I will currently see that there's the 2 groups that I saw in the gradebook, quizzes and papers and discussions. What I want to go ahead and do is I'm going to add a new group here, and I'm going to call this the final. And I'll save there. And I'm also going to create a group for attendance. Oh, I hope to spell it right. And now what I want to do is I want to create the weighted grades for each of these groups that I've created in assignments. To do that, I'm going to go over the ellipses where it says dot, dot, dot. I'll select it. And this time I'm going to select assignment group weights. What I'm going to do is I'm going to say, yes, I want to weight the final grade based on assignment groups. And then all of the assignment groups that have been created, I'm then going to enter the percentage that they are worth. So for attendance, I'm going to say those are worth 10 points of the final grade. My final exam, I'll say is worth 30. I'm going to move my papers and discussions down to 40, and I'm going to make my quizzes worth 20. And so that gives me the overall 100%. And Canvas will let you add in higher or lower than the overall percentage of the final grade. So it's important that when you're adding in these percentages that you see the total down there and it adds up to 100. There have been times when I've gone in and noticed that someone has created their weighted groups into display and it's only total up to 90%. And when you do that, it just creates confusion for your students because they see a final grade that's not accurately reflecting their work, and they'll be sending you questions. Which, the whole point of entering all this information in there is so that students don't need to communicate back and forth to you because everything is already present and visible to them. All right, now that it adds up to 100%, I'm going to go ahead and hit save. But the last thing that I need to do is I've created the weights, I've created the groups, but now I want to make sure that all of these assignments are in the correct grouping down here. So I'm going to go back over here and I'm going to come up to my final paper project. And you see when my cursor changes from the pointer or the arrow to the pointer, I'm going to grab right here and drag it down here to the final exam. And I'm going to do the same thing with the attendance, just drag it down here. Up and looks like I have another final exam. So I'm going to go ahead and move that down here. And now what's going to happen is inside of the gradebook, it's going to total up all the points possible right here and make an average of it. And this average score will then influence the final grade. And so no matter what point values I put in for each of these items right here, it'll come up with an overall average, which will equal the total amount of my final grade. And so what you want to make sure you're doing is each of the items inside of these categories, you want to make sure that they all have equal point values. And so for my papers over here, see how these all kind of have different weighted point weights. I want to make sure that these are as equal as possible, or maybe intentionally you do have them worth different points. My recommendation is when you're kind of doing this, that each of these kind of have the same point values so that the averages make a little bit more sense on how you're weighting them. And again, this is all up to your discretion on how you want to do this. This is just an example of what you can do inside the gradebook. Don't feel like you have to do this in your class. Only do what you're comfortable with, and keep it simple. And Canvas will be happy to keep it simple for you. But now that I've added the weighted grades and I've added all these different assignments into the weighted grades, if I go back to my end over here, it'll go through here and show me 30% of my overall grades. It'll show me the percentage that's scored right here. It'll show me the overall schools, and I'll be able to get that extra information in there. So in theory, if I wanted to go through here, I'm just going to go ahead and quickly manually add some of these points in here. I'm going to see what it looks like and how it changes the overall example at the end of my class. And again, one of the things that's always important to point off is I currently have some of these items hidden. If I want my students to be able to see it, this right here is an indicator your grades are hidden, your students are unable to see it. So that's why you want to make sure you go back over here and publish it so that the students will be able to see those changes. And I'm just doing this to give you an example of, and it looks like this assignment right here is currently unpublished, so it's not letting me manually enter one of the scores. It's also a quiz, so I think it's waiting for the students to actually take the quiz, so it's not letting me override it. But as you'll see over here, I'm able to see that here Jessica has 100% of these two categories, and the final exam is 99.2, and her overall grade is a 99.71 for the overall course. And all that's entered in automatically, and the columns are automatically doing the percentages based off of how the assignment groups have been created. So I know I have covered a lot of information so far in the gradebook. I want to take this time to go through and make sure you have any questions. I'm going to go ahead, and if you want to unmute your microphone, you can go and unmute your microphone and ask that question right here. And then we'll go ahead and move on to the next grade. But I want to make sure that I haven't lost anyone within any of the features that I have covered so far.
I put this in the chat, but I was just wondering if we can hide those columns to the far right. Because I don't like students to see those in the middle of the semester when everything's not done, they start freaking out.
Are you talking the percentage ones?
Yes, yes.
The way you would do that is go into the assignment groups and simply uncheck it. So if I go into my assignments, I click on this ... here, assignment weight groups. If I uncheck this right here.
Oh, okay.
Actually, you know what? I think it might leave it in there. It just doesn't add it into the final grade. Um, yep. So you're wanting to.
I don't think you can.
I think you have to delete it. I think that's
Uh,
which
Okay.
kind of defeats the purpose.
Yeah, I just don't like students seeing these intermediate weightings because they start to freak out. So I would like to be able to hide that, but if I can't, that's okay.
Let me put that down in my notes. I don't think you can hide them once they are created.
Well, I think they're automatically created, correct? And then I've tried to delete them and can't figure out how to delete them because I just go by a straight point system, no weighting. So, yeah, Carol's right. It causes a lot of confusion.
I mean, I do use weighting because sometimes in the middle of the semester, if we're running behind, I delete an assignment or something. And so I use the weighting. But what I do is I don't use it in Canvas. I'm old school and I do it all in Excel.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't think that's an option, but let me see if I can find some research and see if there's a way to hide that. Unfortunately, I don't know of one right now. Jessica, by any chance, would you know?
You can get back to me. That's fine.
Okay.
I don't know off the top of my head. I just want to throw out, and Bradon will mention this later. If you're having like wackadoo issues with your specific gradebook, we can always sit down with you for half an hour, however long it takes, and try to figure out what the issue is and where things are broken. As you can see, there are a lot of bells and whistles and little hidden things and things that can go wrong. So that's absolutely something that we can help you with.
Follow-up question. So I'm one of those people who I have certain things unpublished right now because my students do weekly quizzes, but I haven't made the questions usually before like that week. So, but if I want them, because they can see their final grade always, they're constantly like, well, I have only, 20% of the quizzes, but they've only taken 4 out of 10 kind of thing. So if I want them to be able to see like the total number of quizzes, but I haven't made the questions, is the best thing to do to publish them, but only let students access them for a certain week that it's relevant. Like I'm having a lot of trouble in my classes with students basically looking to the end of the semester and saying, well, I've only got a 30 in this assignment group, but it's because we're only halfway through the semester. Does that make sense? Am I making sense at all?
No, it does make a lot of sense. And unfortunately, it's one of those things to where you definitely don't, especially in that type of quiz, you don't want your students jumping too far ahead. And the biggest thing I would say, what's good about this total final grade here off to the end is that it will only show what assignments have been submitted. So it'll give you a somewhat kind of accurate grade of where you're currently standing based on the assignments that you've completed. And so if it hasn't been submitted or if the assignment hasn't been published, it won't be factored into the total final grade.
Yeah. I'm trying to give them flexibility, where it's like, there's 5 of these, but I dropped the lowest 2. But with Canvas, it ends up actually making them so stressed out because if they skip something, Canvas grades a 0 right now because they've only had 2 out of 5 possibilities. And I just it's a good pedagogical thing, but Canvas actually makes it a very stressful thing for them. Don't know how to deal with that.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those things on here. So the features that I haven't gone over yet is these late policies and the automatic drop ones. If you wanted to do this, you could go through and say, I want to go ahead and remove certain parts of it. But unfortunately, it's kind of one of those things where it's really meant to show the overall grading part.
Yeah.
And about 1.5 years ago, they made some changes that made this a lot more painful, in my opinion. Where you used to be able to tell you used to have control over this final grade right here.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, and unfortunately, they took all those controls out right here. And so that's just kind of one of those things to where Um, at this time, I don't have an answer for that.
Yeah. I almost feel like it would be good for students to get a Canvas tutorial too. Like, I mean, I feel like I end up doing a lot of Canvas tutorials with them in order to
Mhm,
explain to them, like, I can't change these things, but it ends up making it
mhm.
sort of,
Don't freak out yet, just focus on your work.
yeah.
Keep calm, carry on. No, I totally understand what you're saying. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and show a couple more features, and then we're gonna move on to part 2. One of the things that there are video tutorials out there. Unfortunately, I will have to see if we can make a tutorial just on kind of patience with grading. That's kind of one thing that's hard is students will see a lot of these features and they show um, the kind of ins and outs on how things work. But unfortunately, they're more on the technical side and less on um, good student behavior and how to prevent anxiety for your classes. And so I can definitely put that as one of the options, and we'll work with the student services and see if we can get something like that out there to help alleviate some of those nerves. One thing I do want to go through here and show is under actions, I have this import export right here. When I go through and export, what this does is it creates an Excel document. Someone mentioned earlier that they still do all their grading in Excel. Within this, you can actually export all of the grades over here into this icon or into an Excel file that you can open and do your grades manually there. One of the important things, though, is in order to re-import that back in, those cells have to align. And so all the different items that you go through and add, they have to be in the right order. They have to have the right kind of titles to the right headers to each of the columns. And so if you start exporting this Excel or export your gradebook down to an Excel document, which that is a CSV file, and you do a lot of changing of the titles and columns, you add some extra items into it, it could cause issues that will allow you to not be able to import this back into the gradebook. And so it's one of those things on there to where if you are wanting to export this down to your computer so that you can do grades offline, re-import that, you want to make sure you don't change the headers or the cells or any of that information right there. Because if you do, you create little issues that will maybe allow you not be able to import that back in. Um, so one of the reasons why people will use it is there are times where people that have bad internet. So what they'll do is on their home computer, they'll go through and import. They will export their gradebook to their computer. They'll download all the documents, which I'll show you next, to their computer. They'll be able to do all their grading without using internet. And then when they go back into the office or back into a spot with internet, they can then re-import that back in. And so if I were to hit export right here, it'll export the grade back to my computer. And then I can go over here into the dot, dot, dot here and say, all right, I want to go ahead and download all my assignments. It's not showing me the option here. So let me click on the actual name of the paper and I can say download submissions. Um, and so it's really up to your personal ability and your preference on how you do it. There are different reasons why people do it in different ways. And the great thing is Canvas gives you that flexibility. If you're wanting to do things offline, you can do it offline. And so you're able to download it. You can keep it as a backup, or you can just work offline and have all that information there. So looking over my notes, one last thing I do want to cover is this little feature right here where you see this gearbox right here. This is allow you to kind of set the ideas of how the late policy works for your course. I do know a lot of faculty, they just like to manually enter that information into it. So this is just kind of additional things. If you wanted to automatically do the late policy, I can hit this gear over here and I can say, yes, I want to automatically grade missing assignments. It's going to be as a 0. Or I can even sit on there that says, I want to have all late assignments be as something else. And then I can even go over in here and say, if some assignment is submitted late, I'm going to go ahead and take 5% off of it. If you do want to use any of these late policies or use them for the grading purposes, it's important that you also communicate this into your syllabus ahead of time. Again, if you don't want it, just uncheck it, and you'll just have to manually update all the grades over there, whether it's turned in late or whether you want to discount points away from it. I went ahead and opened up the file that I exported out of here. And so this is the export of the gradebook into the Excel document. As you see over here, I have the name, I have the IDs, I have all the points over here. So I could download this, keep it as a backup, or I can go ahead and enter in all of the assignment grades right here. And as I was saying earlier about changing headers, you want to make sure you don't change this information right here, because all these numbers right here, this is what Canvas looks for. And so that's why it's trying to add all the points. And if you change some of these descriptions or change the order, it won't know how to re-import that back in. And so that's how that works. All right. And so that is kind of a basic overview of how the gradebook works inside of Canvas. Now what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to move on to the next section, which is Speedgrader. I personally love Speedgrader because instead of doing a lot of the downloading back and forth, having to do inline editing, inline kind of comments or track comments, track changes inside of Word. What I like about Speedgrader is I'm able to quickly move from a student assignment into another student assignment, make comments, provide a grade, and even use a rubric all with inside of one web page. And I can quickly move from student to student. And so to me, it makes the grading experience a lot faster and a lot more efficient. And so that's why I believe Speedgrader is one of the advantages of the gradebook inside of Canvas. And so I'm going to go ahead and go to a paper assignment. Speedgrader can be used on quizzes and paper assignments, but I'm going to go ahead and show you a paper assignment first, and then I'll jump in and show a quiz and show what that looks like. There's a couple different ways to get into Speedgrader. Right here inside of the gradebook, I can go up to the assignment that I'm looking for, select my ... and then I have the option for Speedgrader. Or what you can do is go to the actual assignment by selecting the title of it. It takes me to that assignment page. And then over off to the side, I'll see Speedgrader. To launch it, all you need to do is select it, and it'll open up a new tab showing you Speedgrader. At the very top corner, you see this eyeball right here. This eyeball allows you to automatically post or hide grades. So it's a good kind of experience, or it's a good trick to go ahead and say, yes, once I start grading, I'm going to go ahead and say hide. I want to hide all the grades just so I don't have to worry about students getting emails and sending me feedback back and forth while I'm in the middle of the grading process. So I went ahead and hit it so that it's any feedback I'm doing, any annotations I'm doing right here, any grades that I enter won't be seen by students until I go over here and say, yes, I want to publish the grades. But here's an example of a student document. And going through here, and as I'm uploading the document here, whether it is a PDF file right here, a Word document, a PowerPoint file, even an individual photo, you'll be able to use these inline editing controls over here to basically mark up the document. So if I go over here and I can say, well, this section right here, this is wrong over here, I can go ahead and select this box. This allows me to create boxes on the document, so I can select it right here. And then if I want to add comments, I can go ahead and say over here, and then place comments into it. I can do the same thing with a strikeout. So if I select strikeout, I can go through over here and say, okay, I want to go ahead and remove that. That's not appropriate. Or I can go over here to this paintbrush and I can free draw on the document if I wanted to. So I'm making some artwork there. Not that you would want to do that on the document. And if you decide that you don't want to have the comment visible to your students and you want to remove it, well, all I have to do is go over here to this little trash can and remove it, and it will remove that annotation. So whether you want to mark up a slide, mark up any kind of information that you're provided by your student for an assignment, I can go through here and select it and mark it up live. Here's a highlighter option where I can select the highlighter. I can even choose different colors. Sorry, my mouse is being weird. So I can select that area there. This allows me to do a little point dropper, so I can select on exactly word and then have a comment over off to the side. And then this is just my normal cursor. Now inside of the Speedgrader window, you can actually go through, and if you wanted to, you could download the document with annotations, or you can download the document without annotations. The way you do this is over here inside the Speedgrader window right here, there's this little download button. If I select this download button, it will download an annotated PDF of everything I've done right here. So this is helpful maybe if you want to keep something for your record, or maybe you want to email them, or for whatever reason you want to keep the annotations. You can click on this little download button right here, and it will download the annotated PDF to your computer. Now, if you want to download the original document that your student submitted, I have this little drop down arrow right here. This will download the original document that was submitted by your student. And that's why you hit this download, and it'll download it to your computer. Um, Again, the other way to do is if you go back to this overall assignment over here, I can select download submissions, and it will download everyone's document that they uploaded in one batch file if you wanted to do that. So I'm going through this document. I can click on any of the items over here. As you'll see on here, someone else has previously gone through. Amy has gone through this document and provided annotations, so I can actually see these annotations. And if I wanted to, because I'm a faculty for this course, I can go ahead and select it, and I could add a reply to annotation that someone adds. So if you have your TA doing some initial grading for you, you could even reply back to this annotation and say, hey, this is a really great point here. You should really focus on this. Students also have the ability to reply back to any of these annotations as they want. So if they have any questions about what you said, they'll be able to open up this annotated document on their computer, view all of your comments, and if they want to, they reply back to you. Now, after a reply is given either from you or from your student, there is a Canvas notification that is sent out that will let you know that a new comment has been put onto your paper one. So this kind of lets you know that there is a comment. You can choose to reply back to that comment, or you can choose not to. It's up to you. But Canvas will automatically send you that notification letting you know that a comment has been given so that you're aware of it. And again, if you want to delete an item, just go up to the trash can and delete it right there. And then off to the side right over here, I also have the important information of when the assignment was submitted. I can actually see that a student viewed the document at a different time right here at the time. But then right off to the side right here is this little score button right here. Because this assignment was created to have Turnitin automatically score the plagiarism algorithm for this document, it's currently showing that this document has a 76% chance of being plagiarized, meaning that it has identified other sources that are likely copied online. Now, just because the score is high doesn't mean a student has plagiarized their document. Most likely it means that they just didn't properly format their document. So that's important to go ahead. If you just select the score right here, it'll open up a new window, and it'll give you in-depth information on the document that it's looking to. It's going to give you information about what it's seeing over here. And it's the first time if you're using Feedback Studio, it'll actually show you step by step. Here's the information that you're seeing. Here's the important stuff that you're seeing. But I just want to point off right here. If I go over here to the 76 right here, I'm going to see over here that this is submitted to a university. It's a 70% match to this university. And as you'll see over here, it's highlighting what the match is. And so there's a very good chance that if I'm seeing this scan right here and it's copying entire sentences and paragraphs, that there's another document that also does that as well. And again, here I can actually go through and navigate between the different assignments of this document that have been uploaded. Here's an example of an essay that we put in here as an example. And you'll see it's been submitted before. It's 98% accurate to what someone else has gone ahead and added. And it's going to show you that match right here. But inside of Speedgrader, you're going to see that score right there. Inside of Speedgrader, if I wanted to, I could add additional comments. This is the same comments that you can do directly inside of the Gradebook. It just puts it right here inside of Speedgrader. So I can add comments that I want right here. And when I'm very done over here, I can go ahead and say, yes, submit. And so when I'm looking at the chat box right now, I'm seeing some conversations about web browsers. For the best experience with Speedgrader, Gradebook, and really Canvas in general, I would encourage people to use Google Chrome. It has the best experience. I have used Safari for a long time. It works, but occasionally some weird things happen. Same thing goes for Firefox or even Microsoft Edge. So it's one of those things on there to where for the best experience, I would encourage you to use Google Chrome. It just seems to handle Canvas and everything best. Sometimes things get really weird when you're doing interactivity with inline, and one version to the next. It just doesn't want to do exactly what they work. But I found that Chrome does a really good job of not giving me any errors or just random bugs. Um, One of the final things I want to show, or I'm going to show a couple more things about Speedgrader, but in order to go from one student to the next, once I input all the grades in right here, I'm going to go ahead and say this is worth 15 points. I hit submit. It's going to save my grade, and then it's going to move me on to the next student. As you'll see over here, here's another paper that Amy has gone through and graded. I can see the markups right here. Here's the comments that I provided. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't switch to the next paper. It kept me on the same one. Here's the comments that have been entered. Here's the grid that's entered, but it also shows when the comments are given. If a student replies back to this paper, I will then see this down here that it was submitted at this time right here. Now, one thing that you'll notice right here is that it's currently showing that this is student 3. I have actually gone through and removed the student names from the assignment so that if I wanted to, I can anonymously grade these papers. The way I did this is by selecting on the gear icon, going to options, and saying hide student names in Speedgrader. So what this does is I then have the ability to change or take out the student's name. Now, it kind of defeats the purpose if you're having your students, like in this example right here, put their name in the document, they can kind of see it. But if you wanted to, you could go through here and hide the student names, hit save settings, and as you'll see, the name will appear right there. One of the other options that you saw is you can go through options and you can change the way the students are listed out over here by changing the order by either the date it was submitted, the current status of the submission, or by the student's name. If I go over here and let's say now that I have my students' names visible, if I click on this drop down arrow right here, I want to be able to see all of the students that are currently listed in my course. So to navigate from student to student, I can either click on this arrow key right here, toggle between one student or the next, or I can click the drop down arrow over here and just select the student that I'm looking to grade. And that's a way that you can jump through your different assignments. The helpful information that you see right here is going to simply show you the average overall score for this grade, and it's going to show you the percentage of grades or the papers that have been graded. And so that's kind of the basics of Speedgrader. But let me go in here and let me jump into another document. And this document is going to be one that has a rubric. And I want to show it how you can grade a paper using Speedgrader and a rubric. So here's a document right here. And because I've added a rubric to the assignment, I then have the ability to say view rubric. I'm going to go ahead and make this window a little bit bigger. So I'm going to put my mouse right there in the middle and drag it over. And so this way I can see my document right here and I can see my rubric. Because I selected view rubric, in fact, I'll do that again, view rubric, I then have the ability to see the exact rubric. I would caution this to be a rubric that is published into your syllabus so your students are aware this is how you're going to be grading assignments. And then all I have to do is come to these areas over here. And if I see the spelling and grammars over here, perfect, no grammatical errors, I can select it and it'll fill in the score right over here. If you wanted to provide some additional comments, there's a little comment icon right here that you can select and type in comments for just this rubric area. Or I can go over here and go down to the next area and say yes. So this was doing pretty good. And as you'll see over here, it automatically will give me a score of 35 out of 50. Now this rubric is built with the idea that it has a 50-point rubric. If the overall points over here was 100 points that I entered in as the assignment, and my rubric is only 50 points, you're going to want to make sure that these points align, your rubric and your overall point value inside of the grade. Otherwise, there might be some misinformation that's given. But as you'll see over here, once you've loaded the rubric in here, it makes the grading extremely easy. You can provide feedback to your students, and then you just select the different areas. And so that you're clearly showing, here's the expectation that I wanted for this document, and here's how you're performing for this expectation and getting a grade. And then of course, when you're done with the grade, all you need to do is hit the save button. It'll save the rubric. Your students will be able to see the rubric and how they scored with the comments that you provided and their overall grade when the students go back and look at their document. All right, so let's go ahead. I'm going to jump back into my class. This time what I want to do is I'm going to go open up a quiz. And I'm going to show you what Speedgrader looks like for a quiz. So as I'm clicking on the different titles over here, this is a quiz that I've created, and in theory, most of the quizzes that you create will be automatically graded. However, if you're creating a quiz that has essay questions, or maybe has true and the false, or fill in the blank, or a matching, and maybe it doesn't, maybe a student's typing or spelling is off, and so the matching doesn't quite work right. Or maybe if you see one question is off, you can actually go into SpeedGrader, quickly go from assignment to assignment, and actually change the overall grade of the quiz. And so as you see, this is going to show me the top information of the quiz. But if I go down here a little bit, it's going to show me here, here's the question, here's my response, and then here's the feedback that is showed to the student. And so I can get a deeper understanding of what my students did. Again, here's the same thing here. I'm able to see the question that I gave, and then here's the answer that was given. And the same thing goes over here. If I see this question over here, the answer in here was incorrect. This isn't what it was supposed to be matching to. I can actually go over here and see, okay, this is the correct answer. Here's what they selected. Now, where this becomes helpful is I can actually go in here and I can actually change the point values of each of these scores. This is a bad example because the assignment's locked. But I can go through here and override these points over here by selecting these items over here. Then I can actually scroll down here to the very bottom, and if I wanted to, I would have the ability to change the overall grades. This assignment is locked, so it's not letting me go through and change it. Um, but let me see if I can find a better example. I'm sorry, I apologize for this. Let me jump into another course real fast. But you'll be able to override the overall score for the grade to make sure it accurately reflects the work that your students have done. One second, I'm sorry. Um, Jessica, are there any questions in the chat box that we can handle while I get to the correct course?
Yeah, so one of the things that I'm seeing come up a lot, and Carol, I see your question about making sure we address comments on essay questions. We'll absolutely get to that. But I think something maybe that would be helpful to clarify is sort of how the manual policy works, setting a manual policy for specific assignments, and sort of how that works in tandem with the hide feature. And Bradon, you probably know way more about this than I do, so if you want to jump in, there's a lot of confusion about, posting your responses to something that you thought that you have hidden, and then students can see it. I think what you'll want to do to sort of start out is, if you know that you don't want students to be able to see what you're working on immediately, if it's a grade, if it's a comment, go ahead and make that assignment or that quiz manual. Once that's set, then you'll be able to make use of that little eye feature in SpeedGrader to hide your specific comments, your specific grades. But if you want to be able to hide something at all, or kind of decide when you want to release grades, release comments, it has to be set on that manual setting first. Is that correct, Bradon?
Yes. And so it's one of those things on there to where it's best to go ahead and automatically go into your gradebook and say manual. And unfortunately, I'm not able to pull up example of the quiz that I want to. I apologize, but let me go ahead and show you again that to answer that question manually. So about a year ago, they went through and changed the way the gradebook is, and they made some changes that I'm not necessarily a fan of. But what it did is it added that ability to suit manual to automatic. So I recommend, if you're wanting to have it where you choose what is seen by your students and when it's seen by your students, the best thing to go ahead and go in there to do is change the gradebook policy to it's way over here, sorry, to be manual. So changing my gradebook posting policy to manual. And this way you'll have to actually say, yes, I want the grades to be published. Yes, I want these to be visible because of the submission comments and the feedback comments. I've gotten reports from other people that sometimes the comments send, sometimes they don't send. And so that's why I just say manually, say no, don't send. And then I want to manually hide the post. Um, Unfortunately, I feel like the feature isn't fully fleshed out yet and there are issues. But when I have this set to manual and then I go in here and hide it, it should prevent them from seeing comments and it should prevent them from seeing grades.
Yeah. Does anyone right now have any questions specifically that relate to this manual function or hiding grades, hiding comments until you are ready to make them live?
I think I'm understanding better. My issue was I graded statistics exams and I did manual and hide. I didn't really know what I was doing. I saw both of those and I think clicked them both. And then when I published the grades, people all got their grades, but they didn't see any comments. And I didn't know that they didn't see my comments for a while till some people started asking why they got points off. And I put in, hours of comments, so that freaked me out. But I got it so that they could see it, but I am worried that I will do it again. But I think I'm understanding better now.
Yeah, if you're confused, it's because it's confusing. This is what's baked into the system. I mean, it should be more intuitive than this. I think this is one of the reasons why people just do everything in Excel. You have a little bit more control over it, the functionality here. So I think just in terms of troubleshooting, it is, if they're not seeing what they're supposed to, check to see if the assignment is hidden still, if your grades are hidden. And you can do that in the gradebook. You can click for the assignment, look for the little drop-down menu that then you want to post grades. And when you do that, it should also post your comments as well. Yeah, Wendy, so if you select a manual policy for the whole course, then you will have to click on that post grades, or in Speedgrader, click the little I to make it not hidden if you hide it. But there is an extra step. Yeah, well then you will then have to release those grades. Does that make sense?
So I think one of the things that you pointed out before is what your students see. And this is one of the things I've complained about Canvas to them directly, saying, hey, can you make this a little bit more visible? And so this right here is what your students see when they log in. When you've hidden your grades, they're going to see this little crosshatch right here saying, oh, these grades aren't published. These aren't visible. And so in order for them to see it, you have to go ahead and say, yes, post grades, and then they can see it. So if I click on this paper right here, this is where I can see the feedback and the annotation. And what's really hard on here is your student goes right here like, oh, so what do I see now? So they have to actually click on it once they get inside of it, or click on view feedback, and then that will load the document down here. And so that's where some of your students get lost is, you would think intuitively, and when I click on this page, it would automatically load down here. Unfortunately, it doesn't. You have to click on this view feedback. The same thing goes for the rubric. The rubric doesn't automatically become visible when your students do it. They have to go over here and click show rubric, and then they'll see that. And so this is one of those kind of design flaws that they have is I see the grade right here, but it doesn't flat out tell me what information am I looking on here? Where do I see the comments? Where do I see that feedback? They have to click into it. They'll see the little comments off to the side, but they won't see the annotations unless they go through and click it. And so I think that's where some of that frustration was heard.
Braden, can they look at their quiz after, like if you have it unavailable, if you set your available, unavailable dates, can they still see their responses?
So for quizzes, that depends on how the quizzes are set up.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I go into this example quiz right here, if I go over here and say view responses always, it means they're going to see what they scored, what they got right, what they got wrong. But if I go in and edit it, I could actually uncheck this box right here. And if I uncheck it, they will just get their overall score. You got an 80 on this quiz, but they won't see the questions they got wrong. They won't see the questions they got right. And so really you have to kind of go on there and limit what level of feedback do you want them to see? Do you want them to see it after the last attempt? Do they want to see it? You can only see the correct answer they got, but you can't see what you got wrong. And then you can even set a date range of, okay, so in this window, I'm going to allow you to look at the correct and wrong answers one day after the quiz, and then after that, you can't see it. And so these settings are all based not on the gradebook, but on how you set up your quizzes inside of Canvas.
Is there a way to pull a question from a copied quiz rather than just the test bank?
So are you saying pulling, like one question into your quiz?
Yeah, so what and maybe this is a Safari thing too, but when I'm trying to develop a quiz, I have some questions that are from an exam or a quiz that maybe I gave last semester, but those questions aren't in a test bank yet that I've created. Is there a way to see that quiz so I can select questions from it rather than retyping them into a test bank?
So good news, bad news. Yes, but not in the current build version of quizzing.
Okay.
So to totally answer that, so currently under quizzing is we have what's called the standard quiz. And that's kind of how most people are building their quizzes. However, there is a new version of quizzing that's going to be coming out in the next 6 months to a year that does allow you to do that. And so I can show you a little example of what that looks like here, if I can find my sandbox here. And so there's a new version and an old version, and as you can tell, it just changes the icon over here, and they work a little bit different here. But I can actually go ahead and copy one of these quizzes, and I can then go ahead and import that and export questions. But it looks very different, and so it's one of those things on there to where we'll be offering more trainings on this later, and then it'll show you how you can import questions in and how you can copy quizzes. Because one of the great features over here is I can take this quiz right here, I can go over here to ... and I can actually copy it. And so I can say, hey, I want to take this original quiz, copy it over. And so I can have quiz 1, and then I can have my final that I'm copying and bringing in together from different quizzes.
If I copy that quiz, do I still have the option to randomly select from a test bank?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And so it's definitely one of those things. I don't want to dig too much into it, but if you want to do a console, I'll be happy to go over all the features. But with this is you can create item banks. You can quit all the different sections over here. It's really easy on the new version to make one quiz into a quiz bank, and then you can take these quiz banks and choose the different parts. So the theory behind this is I could make a chapter 1 quiz, a chapter 2 quiz, a chapter 3 quiz, chapter 4, merge them all together, but only pick a random selection as a item question bank from each of these quizzes that they're already taken. And so it makes it easier to build banks and to pull questions from another quiz into it. It's a different thing, and so I don't want to take up too much time on it.
Bradon, can you touch on the process of giving feedback on essay questions and quizzes? That was a question that came up, and it might be difficult for us to sort of show what it looks like because we are looking at this with like special administrator privileges, so that it's kind of difficult to show what that looks like. But if you could walk through that process, that would be awesome.
So let me see if this one has it set up the way I want to.
So sorry, the problem that I have is I would like to write free-form comments on the essay. You can't do it, it seems like.
So here's a better example of when you're in Speedgrader and you have a question over here. So this is simple A, B, or C. At the bottom of Speedgrader, I have additional comments. And I can actually resize this box to make it bigger or smaller. And so you can't do inline, unfortunately. So I can't go over here and like highlight and strike out and do different comments. But what I can do is when a student answers an essay question or a fill in the blank down here, I can actually go down here for these additional comments and free type my comments here. And so what this means is you can be able to provide that additional comment for the essay inside of the quiz. And so does that kind of answer what you're looking for?
Well, that's what I did. And
Okay.
two things. The box, for some reason, I couldn't get the box to stay big. It smushed back tiny, so it looked ridiculous.
Yeah, that's definitely Chrome has the best experience for that.
Well, and I'm in Chrome, so I don't know.
Oh, that's strange. Sorry.
But I would make it big, and then as soon as I left the question, it smushed down into this little tiny thing that was ridiculous looking. So no, this is what I did. But if I could have had a rubric for the essay question where I could just click, this, and this, but I found that this is what I did. So I'm knowing that this is the best thing that I could do. So that's all I wanted to know, is that there wasn't something cool that I was missing. So
no, unfortunately there's not. And
because I love Speedgrader for papers, and I just wished I could write the same stuff that I do on papers in essay questions. But thank you.
mm-hmm. All right, are there any other questions? And again, one of the things I do want to go back to here, sometimes the gradebook is confusing, and so I want to definitely offer help. At any time, 24/7, you have the ability to contact Canvas directly, and they'll be able to walk you through it more in depth on Speedgrader. If you have any questions, they can pull up your course and go through and do that. But we also have available is you can contact us directly at odetraining@ucdenver.edu, or there's a link right here on our screen that if you want to go ahead and book a consultation, we'll be able to actually look at your class, look at what you're trying to do, and give you the best solution for what you're trying to do for your course. One of the things that is I feel is important to say is that everyone has their own style and approach to grading and how you've written your assignments. And so it's really hard to give blanket answers without knowing what your style is, because there isn't necessarily one choice that's right for everybody. Everyone has a slightly different choice, and Canvas kind of gives you the ability to adjust to what you want. And so that's why if you have any questions or if you want to reach out to us, please feel free to reach out to us. We're more than happy to go through the email or set up a consultation with you and answer your questions. And so I want to make sure that if you got confused or if you missed something, or if I said something wrong that confused you, please feel free to reach out to us. We'll be more than happy to help you and make sure you're going and get you the right information to get you going so that you're able to grade your papers and your students will be happy. And so looking back on there is, can you download similar to downloading assignments in Speedgrader? So if I go over here to an old quiz, I don't think I can download it, but let's see. Not seeing an
quiz
option.
statistics, Bradon?
So quiz statistics will just give you the overall. So in theory, I guess you could print this page off right here, and it'll show you the averages for it. But I don't think you can actually download everything like an assignment. Let's go to the Speedgrader and see what it does. Yeah, I think Carol said it right. You can do it, but it's ugly.
Yeah, it might be in quiz statistics. There's a little button that says student analysis, and I think it'll download as a CSV, but which means it's probably pretty ugly. But you're likely better at Excel than I am. Yeah, it'll download in that, but it's difficult to maneuver.
All right. I want to thank everyone for attending today. I also want to make sure to thank Jessica. She did an amazing job on the chat box. I wasn't looking at everything in there. If you have any more questions, feel free to let us know in the chat box or send us an email. Thank you so much for attending, and I hope everyone has a wonderful day and a wonderful weekend.